Hello, everyone. My name is Bar Perry, and I'll be your photography instructor for today. This will be a sample class out of a larger workshop of 6 classes that we just finished before the summer. This one will be a much shorter one, partially because we dedicate half of the hour of our not weekly classes, of our bi-monthly classes for sharing with the class. The students will email me photos relevant to the class content from the previous class. Um, so if today's sample class is about perspective, for instance, and the last one in our syllabus was um, of lighting, then in class number 4, we'll see photos of class number 3. So uh, I've designed the workshop this way and given half an hour, half of the class for sharing with the intention of creating a sense of community. And I wanted um, the students to feel like they have the time to ask questions and to be together with each other as photography can sometimes be a very solo endeavor. And I also just wanted people to feel connected in these times when we're sometimes separated by screens. So we started off with an introduction to photography, simply with talking a bit about the technology and asking what kind of camera is everyone using, why they chose it, and maybe even some guidance about how to pick their next one. Um, we moved on to talking about the art in photography, and as you might see in this workshop, it doesn't go uh, that much into depth and makes every topic as complex as it can get. We only have an hour, and again, half of it is dedicated to sharing, the other half is to content. So the idea isn't to go fully into each topic, but it is to give a sense to the students uh, and give them a starting point uh, for that perspective of the class. So if we're talking about lighting, for instance, we don't go into how to operate flash for studio portraits, but we might talk about the studio portraits on their own. If I hope that makes sense. Uh, and again, it's intended to not overwhelm the students. Again, it's an introduction class, not a full in-depth one. So after the principles of art, we had lighting, then we had perspective, which is today's sample class as well. And then it was followed actually by editing as background and foreground. I ended up covering it in perspective, and then the 6th class was a wrap-up class. And we just had that last week. This is a slide that I've added from a different class, I believe, and it came later in the presentation. But I found it to be so important that I kept including it in the next following classes, and I wanted to present it earlier in this lesson as well. So I'm a big fan of connecting mindfulness with the act of taking photos because photography can be therapeutic for the photographer, and it can also be reflected in the photos themselves for the viewer. So when the photographer is being mindful of its environment, of their environment, and they slow down to take a couple of seconds as they arrive at the scene, they pay attention to the environment and the emotions that are coming up for them as they observe the environment. And then they um, try to hone in and figure out why those elements in the environment are giving them those emotions. Um, then if we cover all that before we take the photo, I believe that the viewer will feel that as well. The results will just be full of intention, hopefully, and that will create a better quality of the photo for the photo. And I usually ask the students as they're sharing their photos, as you'll see soon, there are examples, at least from the perspective class. I asked them if they've experienced mindfulness in the act of taking the photos for the current class. So, for example, uh, we had a lovely student that loved taking photos of animals and would share the story behind taking them. And there was often a very lovely one. And um, as they were going through the story and how they felt looking at the subjects in their photos, uh, it resonated with the other students, and we just carried it from one sharing experience to the other. And there was positive feedback from the students about that. And the intention, again, was to create a sense of community. So we will share our photos, we'll share the story behind it, and the mindfulness aspect of the students as they were taking the photos. For today, again, we're covering lesson 4. It was about perspective. And for the first slide, I just wanted to explain what is the definition of perspective, at least for me. It is the point of view, and how different objects are positioned from one to another. I split it into different categories. The first one was visual/linear, and in it I included leading lines and bird's eye view. And then I followed up with physical category, and in it I had forced perspective and low angles. And the last one did not receive its own slide, but it overlaps with other perspectives, and that is conceptual. And that is more of the story and the idea behind the intent and the choice of the photographer as they were taking the photos. So why use perspective? What do we get out of it as photographers? So essentially, being humans living in a 3D world, we get a sense of our environment that is missing from a two-dimensional photo. And by using perspective, we can tell a story. And there are different examples of perspectives that we can take as photographers, and they have different narratives that can come out of them. They can evoke different feelings from the viewers. So if you want to convey your own story, you can pick, let's say, leading lines as a perspective or a forced perspective and tell your own story. So one example of mine of using leading lines was at this train station, and the blurry parts, the train that is moving, is it has lines on it, the railings, the blue lines on the train itself, and they're pointing the viewer's gaze from the bottom right to the middle left, where the passengers are standing waiting to board the train. And we can use leading lines basically to help the viewer follow from one area of the photo to the other, to the subject, to the main subject. Next, we have forced perspective. And this perspective is often used for cleverly placed items and subjects, such as this Godzilla dinosaur toy that is closer to the camera. It's in the foreground, and it looks huge compared to the subjects in the background. Again, here it's used in a humorous way, but it doesn't have to be humorous. It doesn't have to be comical in that way. There are other applications of it. And there is a link on this slide that you can follow to see more of those examples, but you can also Google forced perspective photography and see some more more examples. Next, we have low angles. And in this example, I just went low to the ground at the beach. And I love doing this there because it's one of my favorite places, to be honest. Generally, to go to the beach, I love that. So I feel that one of the biggest elements in the beach for me is the sand and the pebbles. And I liked to highlight that by bringing it closer to my lens, and again going close to it, not just by distance from, let's say, the pebbles to the lens, but just my own body, instead of being high but actually being low to the ground. And to me, it magnifies those elements. So it magnifies the pebbles, it even magnifies the beach, the rest of it, so the ocean and the skies. And it takes away from the rest of the environment in this example. But another way to use it is, let's say, if you're in a forest and you're taking your camera low to the ground and you're pointing straight up to the trees and to the canopies. And in either cases, I find that it invokes a sense of awe. If you have such a beautiful environment, you're just really highlighting those features. Next, if in contrast, if you want to give the viewer a sense that they're high above everything and that they have an amazing vantage point on details that you don't get to see being on the ground, you can use a bird's eye view perspective. And it intends to emulate the view that a bird has from up above, as they can see their environment in ways that humans cannot most of the time, unless we use drones, like some photographers do these days, or if we hike very high, or if we take a gondola, if it's in one of the local mountains here in BC, for instance. And again, it also invokes a sense of awe in my eyes. And here I also used leading lines, just the way I cropped the photo, the way I've pointed my camera to the environment, with the start of the band from the bottom right, or sort of middle right, to the curve here, leading up to the horizon. So next, I would like to speak to how to create perspective. And as I've said earlier at the beginning of the workshop, it doesn't intend to go into great depth into the idea of how to create perspective. I've given examples and I've shortly described them, but there's a lot of detail that can go into the concept of how to create perspective. This can go on for hours, but this is again intended just to give an idea of what it means to create perspective. So if you want to create perspective, if you want to create a story, you need to go into your environment and assess the subjects that you have to work with. What is in it? What are the objects in the environment? And I like to separate this this assessment into the foreground, middle ground, and background. And I call this layers of perspective. That's just my way of speaking about this. So, excuse me. So in this slide, with the example of the dog, there's a pillow that I've placed in front of the dog. And that is, to me, the foreground. And the dog is in the middle ground. And the background is the out of focus cushion behind the dog. And I've used the item from this orange cushion as a way to frame the picture. This is an example of me just having choosing to only have a foreground and a background. So the kid, this child, is the subject, and he's in the foreground, and the sky and trees are in the background. And I find that it is just one way of taking some beautiful portraits of people or animals, or objects, doesn't matter. Uh, when you're using just two layers of perspective, foreground and background, I found that for me, it yields very pleasing results, very pleasing portraits. An example that I found online, like with the Godzilla picture that I didn't take, the link is underneath it, is of this sculpted tablet. Not sure exactly necessarily what it is, if it's a tablet or not, but it is a carving. And in here, in this example, there's only a foreground. There's only one layer of perspective, and that is to emphasize the details of the subject. Painters sometimes get their photos, photos of their art pieces taken, and in that case, it's a photo of just the painting, for instance, nothing else, and that really highlights the features of the art piece. Next, for how to create perspective is about thinking about movement, and it's your movement. So when you're in the environment, you can make a lot of choices around moving around your subjects. If you're out in nature, you can choose to go higher above the subject of interest, or lower, closer to the ground, like with the ocean example, the beach example that I've given earlier. And it gives a different sense to the viewer. And look up, if you can rewind, look up the examples that I've given and get a sense of how you felt. And think about the direction that the camera is pointing to. Now, so when you are in the environment, move around and play around and see which angles you like, and after time you'll get a sense of which angles you prefer and how to tell a story using those different angles. So here in this slide, I just mentioned playing with shapes. Just briefly to say this, leading lines is a type of shape. And as with the example in the train station, the lines on the train itself and the guards, the rail guards, lead the viewer's gaze from one end of the photo to the main subject, which were the people. So for the students that are watching this, go out and play, move around, choose different perspectives, go look at the examples that were shown in this class, and see for yourself which ones you like the most. And also go online and Google search perspectives in photography, and see which ones you gravitate to. And again, being mindful, think about why you gravitate toward those perspectives. So to tie this all together, the main thing to take out of today's class is that perspective is a choice, the same way that choosing the lighting scenario for a photo is, and editing is. And go out and study different examples and have fun with it. So I hope that you enjoyed today's class. I hope that you may view this class and learn something from it, and that you choose to join us in the fall. The dates and details will come up on a website shortly, on the BC Brain Wellness Center. And I hope that this class inspired you to go out and take some more photos, and maybe to even reach out to me and ask me some questions if you have any. Don't hesitate to do so before the next session starts in the fall.